How thick is the plasma membrane?
The plasma membrane is only about 8 nanometers thick. It would take over 8,000 plasma membranes to equal the thickness of an average piece of paper.
How often does an aurora appear?
Because it depends on solar winds, electrical particles generated by the sun, and sunspot activity, the frequency of an aurora cannot be determined. Auroras usually appear 2 days after a solar flare, a violent eruption of particles on the sun's surface, and reach their peak 2 years into the 11-year sunspot cycle. The auroras, occurring in the polar regions, are broad displays of usually colored light at night. The northern polar aurora is called aurora borealis or northern lights, and the southern polar aurora is called the aurora australis.
What is a computer virus and how is it spread?
Taken from the obvious analogy with biological viruses. A computer virus is a name for a type of computer program that searches out uninfected computers, infects them by causing them to execute the virus, and then attempts to spread to other computers. A virus does 2 things: execute code on a computer, and spread to other computers. The executed code can accomplish anything that a regular computer program can do. It can delete files, send emails, install programs, and can copy information from one place to another. These actions can happen immediately or after some set delay. It is often not noticed that a virus has infected a computer, because it will mimic the actual actions of the infected computer. By the time it is recognized that the computer is infected, much damage may have occurred. Earliest computer viruses spread via physical media, such as floppy disks. Modern viruses propagate rapidly throughout the Internet. In May 2000, the Eluvea virus made international headlines as it spread around the world in a single day, crashing millions of computers and costing approximately $5 billion in economic damages. Since then, criminals have learned to prevent their viruses from crashing computers, making detection of these viruses much more difficult. The highly advanced CONFICR worm, first detected in 2008, operates silently, ensuring that the typical computer user won't realize that the virus is present.
What are the advantages of tempered glass?
Tempered glass is glass that is heat treated. Glass is first heated and then the surfaces are cooled rapidly. The edges cool first, leaving the center relatively hot compared to the surfaces. As the center cools, it forces the surfaces and edges into compression. Tempered glass is approximately 4 times as strong as annealed glass. It is able to resist temperature differences of 200 degree F, 300 degree F, 90 degree C, 150 degree C. Since it resists breakage, it is favored in many applications for its safety. Characteristics such as automobiles, doors, tub and shower enclosures, and skylights.
What are archaebacteria?
Archaebacteria, domain archaea, are primitive bacteria that often live in extreme environments. This domain includes the following: 1. Thermophils, heat lovers, which live in very hot environments, including the hot sulfur springs of Yellowstone National Park, which reach temperatures ranging from 140 to 176 degrees Fahrenheit, 60 to 80 degrees Celsius. 2. Halophils, salt lovers, which live in locations with high concentrations of salinity, such as the Great Salt Lake in Utah, which has salinity levels that range from 15 to 20%. Seawater normally has a level of salinity of 3%. 3. Methanogens, which obtain their energy by using hydrogen gas, H2, to reduce carbon dioxide, CO2, to methane gas, CH4.
Why do birds migrate annually?
Migratory behavior in birds is inherited, however. Birds will not migrate without certain physiological and environmental stimuli. In the late summer, the decrease in sunlight stimulates the pituitary gland and the adrenal gland of migrating birds, causing them to produce the hormones prolactin and corticosterone respectively. These hormones in turn cause the birds to accumulate large amounts of fat just under the skin, providing them with enough energy for the long migratory flights. The hormones also cause the birds to become restless just prior to migration. The exact time of departure, however, is dictated not only by the decreasing sunlight and hormonal changes, but also by such conditions as the availability of food and the onset of cold weather. The major wintering areas for North American migrating birds are the southern United States and Central America. Migrating ducks follow 4 major flyways south: the Atlantic Flyway, the Mississippi Flyway, the Central Flyway, and the Pacific Flyway. Some bird experts propose that the birds return north to breed for several reasons. 1. Birds return to nest because there is a huge insect supply for their young. 2. The higher Earth's latitude in the summer in the northern hemisphere. The longer the daylight available to the parents to find food for their young. 3. Less competition exists for food and nesting sites in the north. 4. In the north, there are fewer mammal predators for nesting birds, which are particularly vulnerable during the nesting stage. 5. Birds migrate south to escape the cold weather, and they return north when the weather is more temperate.
How much do plants contribute to the human diet?
In the United States and Western Europe, approximately 65% of a human being's total caloric intake and 35% of consumed protein are obtained from plants or plant products. Soybeans are an example of a plant with high protein content. In developing nations, almost 90% of calories and more than 80% of protein in a person's diet are from plants.
How dangerous is Clostridium botulinum?
The bacterium Clostridium botulinum can grow in food products and produce a toxin called botulinum, the most toxic substance known. Microbiologists estimate that 1 gram of this toxin can kill 14 million adults. This bacterium can withstand boiling water, 212 degrees Fahrenheit or 100 degrees Celsius, but is killed in 5 minutes in 248 degrees Fahrenheit 120 degrees Celsius. This tolerance makes Clostridium botulinum a serious concern for people who can vegetables at home. If home canning is not done properly, this bacterium will grow in the anaerobic conditions of the sealed container and create extremely poisonous food. The endospores of Clostridium botulinum can germinate in poorly prepared canned goods. So individuals should never eat food from a can that appears swollen, as it is a sign that the can has become filled with gas released during germination. Consuming food from a can containing endospores that have undergone germination can lead to nerve paralysis, severe vomiting, and even death.
Which plant has been investigated as a source of petroleum?
A number of plant species have been investigated as potential sources of petroleum. The shrub called the gopher plant, Euphorbia lathyrus, produces significant quantities of a milk-like sap called latex that is an emulsion of hydrocarbons in water. Another candidate is Pittosporum resiniferum, a native of the Philippines. The fruit of this plant, called a petroleum nut, is quite large and the oil harvested from it is frequently used for illumination. Various experiments are in progress to use vegetable and seed oils as diesel substitutes, particularly in farm machinery. In Western Europe, there are over 200 power plants that burn rubbish to produce electricity. France, Denmark, and Switzerland recover 50, 60, and 80% of their municipal waste respectively. Biomass can be converted into biofuels such as biogas or methane, methanol, and ethanol. However, the process has been more costly than the conventional fossil fuel processes. Rubbish buried in the ground can provide methane gas through anaerobic decomposition. 1 ton of refuse can produce 8,000 cubic feet, 227 cubic meters, of methane.
Since fungi lack chlorophyll necessary to produce their own food, how do they obtain food?
Fungi are saprobes that absorb nutrients from wastes and dead organisms. Instead of taking food inside its body and then digesting it as an animal would, a fungus digests food outside its body by secreting strong hydrolytic enzymes onto the food. In this way, complex organic compounds are broken down into simpler compounds that the fungus can absorb through the cell wall and cell membrane.
How did scientists decide that DNA was the genetic material for all cellular organisms?
The proof that the material basis for a gene is DNA came from the work of Oswald T. Avery, 1877–1955, Colin M. MacLeod, 1909–1972, and Macklin McCarty, 1911–2005, in a paper published in 1944. This group of scientists followed the work of Frederick Griffith, 1879–1941, in order to discover what causes non-lethal bacteria to transform to a lethal strain. Using specific enzymes, all parts of the lethal bacteria were degraded, including the sugar-like coat, the proteins, and the RNA. The degradation of these substances by enzymes did not affect the transformation process. Finally, when the lethal bacteria were exposed to DNase, an enzyme that destroys DNA, all transformation activity ceased. The transforming factor was DNA.
Does the use of plastic products present a health risk?
The chemical bisphenol A, also called BPA, has been used to make lightweight hard plastics and epoxy resins since the 1960s. BPA may be found in many food and beverage packaging, including baby bottles, infant feeding cups, water bottles, plastic dinnerware, toys, and other products. The epoxy resins are used in the inside lining of metal food cans, bottle tops, floorings, paints, and water supply pipes. In general, plastic products made with BPA will have a number 7 recycling symbol on them or contain the letters PC near the recycling symbol. Although many studies have shown BPA to be safe, some recent studies have reported subtle effects of low doses of BPA in laboratory animals. It has not been proven that BPA is harmful to adults or children, but certain precautions have been recommended while research continues. These precautions include not using scratched baby bottles and infant feeding cups and not using BPA containers to heat food.
What is e-cycling?
Cycling is the reuse and recycling of electronic equipment. Donating used electronic equipment for use by others is the environmentally preferred alternative to discarding used electronics. If an electronic device cannot be reused, it should be recycled. The recycling rate for electronic devices is only 18%. With the remaining amount of disposed electronics being discarded in landfills. One of the goals of the Plug Into E-Cycling campaign, a partnership between the EPA and leading consumer electronics manufacturers and retailers, is to increase the recycling rate of electronics to 35%. In 2008, the Plug Into E-Cycling partners recycled 34,000 tons. 30,844 metric tons, of used consumer electronics.
What is the difference between RAM and ROM?
Random access memory, RAM, is where programs and the systems that run the computer are stored until the CPU can access them. RAM may be read and altered by the user. In general, the more RAM, the faster the computer. RAM holds data only when the current is onto the computer. Newer computers have DDR, double data rate, memory chips. Read-only memory, ROM, is memory that can be read, but not altered by the user. ROM stores information, such as operating programs, even when the computer is switched off.
Are any devices being developed to replace silicon chips?
When transistors were introduced in 1948, they demanded less power than fragile high-temperature vacuum tubes. They allowed electronic equipment to become smaller, faster, and more dependable, and they generated less heat. These developments made computers much more economical and accessible. They also made portable radios practical. However, the smaller components were harder to wire together, and hand wiring was both expensive and error-prone. In the early 1960s, circuits on silicon chips allowed manufacturers to build increased power, speed, and memory storage into smaller packages, which required less electricity to operate and generated even less heat. While through most of the 1970s manufacturers could count on doubling the components on a chip every year. Without increasing the size of the chip, the size limitations of silicon chips are becoming more restrictive. Though components continue to grow smaller, the same rate of shrinking cannot be maintained. Researchers are investigating different materials to use in making circuit chips. Gallium arsenide is harder to handle in manufacturing, but it has the potential for greatly increased switching speed. Organic polymers are potentially cheaper to manufacture and could be used for liquid crystal and other flat-screen displays, which need to have their electronic circuits spread over a wide area. Unfortunately, organic polymers do not allow electricity to pass through as well as the silicons do. Several researchers are working on hybrid chips, which could combine the benefits of organic polymers with those of silicon. Researchers are also in the initial stages of developing integrated optical chips, which would use light rather than electric current. Optical chips would generate little or no heat, would allow faster switching, and would be immune to electrical noise.
How is senescence defined?
Senescence, from the Latin senex, meaning old, is the process of aging. Physiological changes continue to occur even after complete physical growth is attained at maturity. As people age, the body is less able to and less efficient in adapting to environmental changes. Maintaining homeostasis becomes harder and harder, especially when the body is under stress. Ultimately, death occurs when the combination of stresses cannot be overcome by the body's existing homeostatic mechanisms.
What is the most expensive spice in the world?
The world's most expensive spice is saffron. The spice was highly sought after by the ancient civilizations of Egypt, Assyria, Phoenicia, Persia, Crete, Greece, and Rome. The term saffron comes from the Arabic word za'afaran, meaning yellow. The spice is obtained from the delicate stigmas of an autumn crocus. Crocus sativus, a species native to eastern Mediterranean countries and Asia Minor. Spain is the principal producer of saffron for world markets. Crocus sativus is propagated by corms. The blooming period for the crocus is approximately 2 weeks, after which the flowers must be picked while they are in full bloom and before any signs of wilting. Once picked, the 3-part stigmas are removed from the petals before the petals wilt. This is a time-consuming process that can only be done by hand as the stigmas are very fragile. Then the stigmas are roasted and sold either as whole threads, whole stigmas, or powder. In order to harvest 1 pound, 0.45 kilogram, of the spice, between 75,000 and 100,000 flowers must be picked. Approximately 4,000 stigmas yield 1 ounce, 28 grams, of the spice. In 2010 it was reported that wholesale price of low-quality saffron was $500 per pound, $1,100 per kilogram. The average retail price in Western countries is $1,000 per pound. $2,200 per kilogram, confirming its place as the world's most costly spice.
What does the color of a star indicate?
The color of a star gives an indication of its temperature and age. Stars are classified by their spectral type. From oldest to youngest and hottest to coolest, the types of stars are. Each type is further subdivided on a scale of 0 to 9. The Sun is a type G2 star.
How long do chemicals from marijuana stay in the body?
Hen marijuana is smoked, tetrahydrocannabinol, THC. Its active ingredient is absorbed primarily in the fat tissues. The body transforms the THC into metabolites, which can be detected by urine tests for up to a week. Tests involving radioactively labeled THC have traced the metabolites for up to a month. The retention of labeled THC in humans is about 40% at 3 days and 30% at 1 week. Schedule V low potential for abuse. May contain lometil, parapectilin, small amounts of narcotics. Regulated, charcoal, Robitussin, in the same manner as non-scheduled prescription drugs.
What is 24-karat gold?
The term carat refers to the percentage of gold versus the percentage of an alloy in a piece of jewelry or a decorative object. Gold is too soft to be usable in its purest form and has to be mixed with other metals. 1 carat is equal to 1/24th part fine gold. Thus, 24-karat gold is 100% pure and 18-karat gold is 18/24 or 75% pure.
How did the electrical unit watt originate?
Named for the Scottish engineer and inventor James Watt. 1736 to 1819, the watt is used to measure electric power. An electric device uses 1 watt when 1 volt of electric current drives 1 ampere of current through it.
What were the first monkeys and chimpanzees in space?
On a United States Jupiter flight on December 12, 1958, a squirrel monkey named Old Reliable was sent into space, but not into orbit. The monkey drowned during recovery. On another Jupiter flight, on May 28, 1959, 2 female monkeys were sent 300 miles, 482.7 kilometers, high. Abel was a 6-pound, 2.7 kilogram, rhesus monkey and Baker was an 11-ounce, 0.3 kilogram. Squirrel monkey. Both were recovered alive. A chimpanzee named Ham was used on a Mercury flight on January 31. 1961 Ham was launched to a height of 157 miles, 253 kilometers, into space but did not go into orbit. His capsule reached a maximum speed of 5,857 miles, 9,426 kilometers, per hour and landed 422 miles. 679 kilometers, downrange in the Atlantic Ocean, where he was recovered unharmed. On November 29, 1961, the United States placed a chimpanzee named Enos into orbit and recovered him alive after 2 complete orbits around Earth. Like the Soviets, who usually used dogs, the United States had to obtain information on the effects of space flight on living beings before they could actually launch a human into space.
How much lymph is in the body?
The body contains approximately 1 to 2 quarts, 1 or 2 liters of lymph, which accounts for 1 to 3% of body weight.
Which island region has the greatest concentration of active volcanoes?
In the early 1990s, 1,133 seamounts, submerged mountains, and volcanic cones were discovered in and around Easter Island. Many of the volcanoes rise more than a mile above the ocean floor. Some are close to 7,000 feet, 2,134 meters, tall. Although their peaks are still 2,500 to 5,000 feet, 760 to 1,500 meters, below the surface of the sea.
When was the first plant patent issued?
Henry F. Bosenberg, a landscape gardener, received U.S. plant patent number 1 on August 18, 1931. For a climbing or trailing rose.
Who developed fiberglass?
Coarse glass fibers were used for decoration by the ancient Egyptians. Other developments were made in Roman times. Parisian craftsman Ignace Dubuispanel was granted a patent for the spinning and weaving of drawn glass strands in 1836. In 1893, the Libby Glass Company exhibited lampshades at the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago that were made of coarse glass thread woven together with silk. However, this was not a true woven glass. Between 1931 and 1939, the Owens, Illinois Glass Company and the Corning Glass Works developed practical methods of making fiberglass commercially. Once the technical problem of drawing out the glass threads to a fraction of their original thinness was solved, basically an endless strand of continuous glass filament as thin as 1/5000 of an inch, 0.005 millimeters. The industry began to produce glass fiber for thermal insulation and air filters, among other uses. When glass fibers were combined with plastics during World War II, a new material was formed. Glass fibers did for plastics what steel did for concrete, gave strength and flexibility. Glass fiber reinforced plastics, GFRP, became very important in modern engineering. Fiberglass combined with epoxy resins and thermosetting polyesters are now used extensively in boat and ship construction. Sporting goods, automobile bodies, and circuit boards in electronics.
What cheeses are associated with fungi?
The unique flavor of cheeses such as Roquefort, Camembert, and Brie is produced by the action of members of the genus Penicillium. Roquefort is often referred to as the king of cheeses. It is one of the oldest and best known in the world. This blue cheese has been enjoyed since Roman times and was a favorite of Charlemagne, king of the Franks and emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, 742 to 814. Roquefort is made from sheep's milk that has been exposed to the mold. Penicillium roqueforti and aged for 3 months or more in the limestone caverns of Mount Comelu, near the village of Roquefort in southwestern France. This is the only place true Roquefort can be aged. It has a creamy, rich texture and is pungent, piquant, and salty. It has a creamy white interior with blue veins. The cheese is held together with a snowy white rind. True Roquefort is authenticated by the presence of a red sheep on the emblem of the cheese's wrapper. Penicillium camemberti give Camembert and Brie cheeses their special qualities. Napoleon is said to have christened Camembert cheese with its name. Supposedly the name comes from the Norman village where a farmer's wife first served it to Napoleon. This cheese is formed of cow's milk cheese and has a white, downy rind and a smooth, creamy interior. When perfectly ripe and served at room temperature, the cheese should ooze thickly. Although Brie is made in many places, Brie from the region of the same name, east of Paris, is considered one of the world's finest cheeses by connoisseurs. Similar to Camembert, it has a white, surface-ripened rind and smooth, buttery interior.
What slime mold serves as a model organism in developmental biology?
Dictyostelium discoideum has been studied as a model for the developmental biology of complex organisms. Under optimum conditions, this organism lives as individual, amoeboid cells. When food is scarce, the cells stream together into a moving mass, resembling a slug that differentiates into a stalk with a spore-bearing body at its top. This structure releases spores that can grow into a new amoeboid cell. The development from identical, free-living cells to a multicellular organism simulates many of the properties of more complex and complicated organisms.
What is bioinformatics?
Bioinformatics is the field of science in which biology, computer science, and information technology merge into a single discipline. The ultimate goal of the field is to enable the discovery of new biological insights as well as to create a global perspective from which unifying principles in biology can be discerned. There are three important subdisciplines within bioinformatics. 1. The development of new algorithms and statistics with which to assess relationships among members of the large data sets. 2. The analysis and interpretation of various types of data including nucleotide and amino acid sequences, protein domains, and protein structures, and 3. The development and implementation of tools that enable efficient access and management of different types of information.
How many people visit a dentist regularly?
Only about half the population visits a dentist as often as once a year. Children, ages 2 to 17, visit the dentist more frequently than adults.
Is white gold really gold?
White gold is the name of a class of jewelers' white alloys used as substitutes for platinum. Different grades vary widely in composition, but usual alloys consist of between 20% and 50% nickel, with the balance gold. A superior class of white gold is made of 90% gold and 10% palladium. Other elements used include copper and zinc. The main use of these alloys is to give the gold a white color.
Which scientists made significant discoveries toward the understanding of photosynthesis?
The ancient Greeks and Romans believed that plants derived their food from the soil. The earliest experiment to test this hypothesis was performed by the Belgian scientist Jan-Baptiste van Helmont. 1577 to 1644, who grew a willow tree in a container of soil and fed it only water. At the end of 5 years, the weight of the willow tree had increased by 164 pounds. 74.4 kilograms, while the weight of the soil had decreased by 2 ounces, 57 grams. Van Helmont concluded the plant had received all its nourishment from the water and none from the soil. Joseph Priestley, 1733 to 1804, demonstrated that air was restored by plants. In 1771, Priestley conducted an experiment in which he placed a lighted candle in a glass container and allowed it to burn until extinguished by lack of oxygen. He then put a plant into the same chamber and allowed it to grow for a month. Repeating the candle experiment a month later, he found that the candle would now burn. Priestley's experiments showed that plants release oxygen, O2, and take in carbon dioxide, CO2, produced by combustion. The Dutch physician Jan Ingenhousz, 1730 to 1799, confirmed Priestley's ideas. emphasizing that air is restored only by green plants in the presence of sunlight. Evidence of photosynthesis's two-stage process was first presented by F. Blackman. 1866 to 1947, in 1905. Blackman had identified that both a light-dependent stage and a light-independent stage occur during photosynthesis. In 1930, C.B. Van Niel, 1923 to 1977, became the first person to propose that water, rather than carbon dioxide, was the source of the oxygen that resulted from photosynthesis. In 1937, Robert Hill, 1899 to 1991, discovered that chloroplasts are capable of producing oxygen in the absence of carbon dioxide only when the chloroplasts are illuminated and provided with an artificial electron acceptor.
What does pH mean when applied to soil?
Literally, pH stands for potential of hydrogen and is the term used by soil scientists to represent the hydrogen ion concentration in a soil sample. The relative alkalinity acidity is commonly expressed in terms of the symbol pH. The neutral point in the scale is 7, soil testing below 7 is said to be acidic. Soil testing above pH 7 is alkaline. The pH values are based on logarithms with a base of 10. Thus, a soil testing pH 5 is 10 times as acidic as soil testing pH 5. While a soil testing pH 4 is 100 times as acidic as soil testing pH 6.
How large is a nanometer?
A nanometer equals 1 billionth of a meter. A sheet of paper is about 100,000 nanometers thick. As a comparison, a single-walled carbon nanotube, measuring 1 nanometer in diameter, is 100,000 times smaller than a single strand of human hair which measures 100 micrometers in diameter.
What is rosin?
Rosin is the resin produced after the distillation of turpentine, obtained from several varieties of pine trees, especially the longleaf pine, Pinus palustris, and the slash pine, Pinus caribea. Rosin has many industrial uses, including the preparation of inks, adhesives, paints, sealants, and chemicals. Rosin is also used by athletes and musicians to make smooth surfaces less slippery.
What are the major divisions of the human skeleton?
The human skeleton has two major divisions, the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. The axial skeleton includes the bones of the center or axis of the body. The appendicular skeleton consists of the bones of the upper and lower extremities.
What is the poison on arrows used by South American Indians to kill prey and enemies?
The botanical poison used by the Aucas and similar tribes in the South American jungles is curare. It is a sticky, black mixture with the appearance of licorice and is processed from either of two different vines. One is a liana, Condodendron tomentosum, the other is a massive, tree-like vine, Strychnos quainensis.
What is meant by the term orphan drugs?
Orphan drugs are intended to treat diseases that affect fewer than 200,000 Americans. With little chance of making money, a drug company is not likely to undertake the necessary research and expense of finding drugs that might treat these diseases. Also, if the drug is a naturally occurring substance, it cannot be patented in the United States. And companies are reluctant to invest money in such a medication. When it cannot be protected against exploitation by competing drug companies. Encouragingly, the Orphan Drug Act of 1983 offers a number of incentives to drug companies to encourage development of these drugs. The act has provided hope for millions of people with rare and otherwise untreatable conditions.
How did geology influence Darwin?
While traveling aboard the HMS Beagle, Charles Darwin read The Principles of Geology by Charles Lyell, 1797–1875. Catastrophism was the popular theory of the time about the forces driving geological change. Lyell's theory suggested that geologic change was not solely the result of random catastrophes. Rather, he proposed that geologic formations were most often the result of everyday occurrences like storms, waves, volcanic eruptions, and earthquakes that could be observed within an individual lifetime. This idea, that the same geologic processes at work today were also present during our evolutionary past, is known as uniformitarian. This conclusion also led Lyell and, before him, James Hutton, 1726–1797. To suggest that Earth must be much older than the previously accepted age of 6,000 years. Because these uniform processes would have required many millions of years to generate the structures he observed. Reading Lyell's work gave Darwin a new perspective as he traveled through South America and sought a mechanism by which he could explain his thoughts on evolution.
Why do lunar eclipses happen?
A lunar eclipse occurs only during a full moon when the moon is on one side of Earth. The sun is on the opposite side, and all three bodies are aligned in the same plane. In this alignment, Earth blocks the sun's rays to cast a shadow on the moon. In a total lunar eclipse, the moon seems to disappear from the sky when the whole moon passes through the umbra, or total shadow, created by Earth. A total lunar eclipse may last up to 1 hour and 40 minutes. If only part of the moon enters the umbra, a partial eclipse occurs. A penumbral eclipse takes place if all or part of the moon passes through the penumbra. Partial shadow or shade, without touching the umbra. It is difficult to detect this type of eclipse from Earth. From the moon one could see that Earth blocked only part of the sun.
How hard does the heart work?
The heart squeezes out about 2 ounces, 71 grams, of blood at every beat and daily pumps at least 2,500 gallons, 9,450 liters, of blood. On the average, the adult heart beats 70 to 75 times a minute. The rate of the heartbeat is determined in part by the size of the organism. Generally, the smaller the size, the faster the heartbeat. Thus women's hearts beat 6 to 8 beats per minute faster than men's hearts do. At birth the heart of a baby can beat as fast as 130 times per minute.
How have dill and anise been used throughout history?
Dill, Anethum graveolens, has long been used for medicinal purposes. The Egyptians used dill as a soothing medicine. Greeks habitually used the herb to cure the hiccups. During the Middle Ages, dill was prized for the protection it purportedly provided against witchcraft. Magicians and alchemists used dill to concoct spells. While a commonly known wives' tale stated that dill added to wine could enhance passion, colonial settlers brought dill to North America, where it became known as meat and seed because children were given dill seed to chew during long sermons in church. The Romans brought the licorice-flavored herb, anise, Pimpinella anisum, from Egypt to Europe, where they used it as payment for their taxes. It became a popular flavoring for cakes, cookies, bread, and candy.
What is the average age when puberty begins?
The average age when puberty begins in the United States today is around 12 years in boys and 11 years in girls. The normal range is 10 to 15 years in boys and 9 to 14 years in girls.
What is the most destructive insect in the world?
The most destructive insect is the desert locust, Schistosera gregaria. The locust of the Bible, whose habitat ranges from the dry and semi-arid regions of Africa and the Middle East, through Pakistan and northern India. This shorthorn grasshopper can eat its own weight in food a day. And during long migratory flights a large swarm can consume 20,000 tons, 18,144,000 kilograms, of grain and vegetation a day.
How did the protist fight of Phytophthora infestans influence Irish history?
Phytophthora infestans, one of the potato's most lethal pathogens, causes the late blight of potato disease. This pathogen was responsible for the Irish potato famine of 1845 to 1849. P. Infestans causes the leaves and stem of the potato plant to decay, eventually causing the tuber to stop growing. In addition, the tubers are attacked by the pathogen and rot. It has been estimated that during the potato famine 1.5 million Irish people emigrated from their country and moved to various parts of the world, but most immigrated to the United States. An estimated 400,000 people perished during the famine due to malnutrition.
What is the purpose of the International Space Station, ISS?
The International Space Station, ISS, orbits Earth at an altitude of about 250 miles, 400 kilometers. The ISS travels at 17,500 miles per hour, 32,410 kilometers per hour. In an orbit that extends from 52 degrees north latitude to 52 degrees south latitude. Its main purpose is to serve as a laboratory for materials, communications technology, and biological and medical research in an environment that lacks the force of gravity.
What is a close encounter of the third kind?
UFO expert J. Alan Hynek, 1910 to 1986, developed the following scale to describe encounters with extraterrestrial beings or vessels. Close encounter of the first kind, sighting of a UFO at close range with no other physical evidence. Close encounter of the second kind, sighting of a UFO at close range, but with some kind of proof, such as a photograph, or an artifact from a UFO. Close encounter of the third kind, sighting of an actual extraterrestrial being. Close encounter of the fourth kind, abduction by an extraterrestrial spacecraft.
How prevalent is back pain in the United States?
Studies have found that low back pain is the most common source of pain. It is also the leading cause of disability in Americans under 45 years old. Back pain may be the result of an injury or associated with certain diseases and conditions. Some conditions and diseases which may cause back pain are scoliosis, arthritis, Spinal stenosis, pregnancy, kidney stones, endometriosis, fibromyalgia, infections, tumors, or stress. Tense muscles, spasms, ruptured discs, and other disc problems are also causes of back pain. Exercise, a diet to maintain a healthy weight, and learning to lift properly will prevent back pain.
How far from shore do shark attacks occur?
In a study of 570 shark attacks, it was found that most shark attacks occur near shore. These data are not surprising since most people who enter the water stay close to the shore.
What are the largest meteorites that have been found in the world?
The famous Willamette, Oregon, iron, displayed at the American Museum of Natural History in New York, is the largest specimen found in the United States. It is 10 feet, 3 meters, long and 5 feet, 1.5 meters, high.
When were the major classes of plant hormones identified and who is associated with their identification?
Auxon's Charles Darwin, 1809 to 1882, and his son, Francis, 1845 to 1925. Performed some of the first experiments on growth-regulating substances. They published their 27 results in 1881 in The Power of Movement in Plants. In 1926 Fritz W. Wendt. 1903 to 1990, isolated the chemical substance responsible for elongating cells in the tips of oat, genus Avena, seedlings. He named this substance auxin, from the Greek term auxein, meaning to increase. Gibberellins. In 1926 the Japanese scientist Ieki Kurosawa discovered a substance produced by a fungus, Gibberella fujikuroa, that caused a disease, foolish seedling disease, in rice. Oryza sativa, seedlings in which the seedlings would grow rapidly but appear sickly and then fall over. The Japanese chemists Teijiro Yabuta, 1888 to 1977, and Yuzuki Tsumaiki, 1901 to 1974, isolated the compound and named it gibberellin in 1938. Cytokinins. Johannes van Overbeek discovered a potent growth factor in coconut. Cocos nucifero, milk in 1941. In the 1950s Folke Skog, 1908 to 2001, was able to produce 1,000-fold purification of the growth factor but was unable to isolate it. Carlos O. Miller, 1923, Skog, and their colleagues succeeded in isolating and identifying the chemical nature of the growth factor. They named the substance kinidin and the group of growth regulators to which it belonged cytokinins because of their involvement in cytokinesis or cell division. Ethylene. Even before the discovery of auxin in 1926, ethylene was known to have effects on plants. In ancient times the Egyptians would use ethylene gas to ripen fruit. During the 1800s, shade trees along streets with lamps that burned ethylene. The illuminating gas would become defoliated from leaking gas. In 1901, Dmitry Neljabov demonstrated that ethylene was the active component of illuminating gas. Abscisic acid. Philip F. Waring, 1914 to 1996. Discovered large amounts of a growth inhibitor in the dormant buds of ash and potatoes that he called dormin. Several years later, in the 1960s, Frederick T. Adicott, 1912 to 2009, reported the discovery in leaves and fruits of a substance capable of accelerating abscission that he called abscison. It was soon discovered that dormin and abscison were identical chemically.
Why and how do cats purr?
Experts cannot agree on how or why cats purr, or on where the sound originates. Some think that the purr is produced by the vibration of blood in a large vein in the chest cavity. Where the vein passes through the diaphragm, the muscles around the vein contract, nipping the blood flow and setting up oscillations. These sounds are magnified by the air in the bronchial tubes and the windpipe. Others think that purring is the vibrations of membranes called false vocal cords, located near the vocal cords. No one knows for sure why a cat purrs, but many people interpret the sound as one of contentment. Cats are also known to purr while in pain, such as while giving birth or dying, possibly as a way to soothe themselves.
What is the Christmas factor?
In the clotting of blood, factor IX, or the Christmas factor, is a coagulation factor present in normal plasma, but deficient in the blood of persons with hemophilia B or Christmas disease. It was named after a man named Christmas who, in 1952, was the first patient in whom this genetic disease was shown to be distinct from hemophilia. Another genetic blood clotting disease in which the blood does not have factor VIII.
How large is the prostate gland?
The prostate gland in healthy adult males is about the size of a walnut. It is located in front of the rectum and under the bladder. The prostate surrounds the urethra. When it becomes enlarged, it squeezes the urethra, restricting the flow of urine.
Do bacteria all have the same shape?
Bacteria have three main shapes: spherical, rod-shaped, and spiral. Spherical bacteria, known as cocci, occur singularly in some species and as groups in other species. Cocci have the ability to stick together and form a pair, diplococci, when they stick together in long chains. They are called streptococci. Irregularly shaped clumps or clusters of bacteria are called staphylococci. Rod-shaped bacteria, called bacilli, occur as single rods or as long chains of rods. Spiral or helical-shaped bacteria are called spirilla.
What is a pixel?
A pixel, from the words pix, for picture, and element, is the smallest element on a video display screen. A screen contains thousands of pixels, each of which can be made up of one or more dots or a cluster of dots. On a simple monochrome screen, a pixel is one dot. The two colors of image and background are created when the pixel is switched either on or off. Some monochrome screen pixels can be energized to create different light intensities to allow a range of shades from light to dark. On color screens, 3-dot colors are included in each pixel: red, green, and blue. The simplest screens have just one dot of each color. But more elaborate screens have pixels with clusters of each color. These more elaborate displays can show a large number of colors and intensities. On color screens, black is created by leaving all three colors off, white by all three colors on, and a range of grays by equal intensities of all the colors. The resolution of a computer monitor is expressed as the number of pixels on the horizontal axis and the number of pixels on the vertical axis. For example, a monitor described as 800 x 600 has 800 pixels on the horizontal axis and 600 pixels on the vertical axis. The higher the numbers, example 1600 x 1200, the better the resolution.
Where are asteroids found?
The asteroids, also called the minor planets, are smaller than any of the 8 major planets in the solar system and are not satellites of any major planet. The term asteroid means star-like because asteroids appear to be points of light when seen through a telescope. Most asteroids are located between Mars and Jupiter, between 2.1 and 3.3 AUS, astronomical units, from the Sun. Ceres, the largest and first to be discovered, was found by Giuseppe Piazzi on January 1, 1801, and has a diameter of 582 miles, 936 kilometers. A second asteroid, Pallas, was discovered in 1802. Since then, astronomers have identified more than 18,000 asteroids and have established orbits for about 5,000 of them. Some of these have diameters of only 0.62 mile, 1 kilometer. Originally, astronomers thought the asteroids were remnants of a planet that had been destroyed. Now they believe asteroids to be material that never became a planet. Possibly because it was affected by Jupiter's strong gravity. Not all asteroids are in this main asteroid belt. Three groups of asteroids, the near-Earth asteroids, NEAs, reside in the inner solar system. The Aten asteroids have orbits that lie primarily inside Earth's orbit. However, at their farthest point from the Sun, these asteroids may cross Earth's orbit. The Apollo asteroids cross Earth's orbit, some come even closer than the Moon. The Amor asteroids cross the orbit of Mars, and some come close to Earth's orbit. The Trojan asteroids move in virtually the same orbit as Jupiter but at points 60 degrees ahead or 60 degrees behind the planet. In 1977 Charles Cowell discovered an object now known as Chiron orbiting between Saturn and Uranus. Originally catalogued as an asteroid, Chiron was later observed to have a coma, a gaseous halo, and it may be reclassified as a comet.
What makes knuckles crack?
When a person pulls quickly on his or her finger, a vacuum is created in the joint space between the bones, displacing the fluid normally found in the space. The popping sound occurs when the fluids rush back into the empty gap.
What is synthetic skin?
The material consists of a very porous collagen fiber bonded to a sugar polymer, glycominoglycan, obtained from shark cartilage. It is covered by a sheet of silicon rubber. It was developed by Yanis V. Yanis, 1935, and his colleagues at Massachusetts Institute of Technology around 1985. Soon after its introduction, synthetic skin was used to successfully treat more than 100 severely burned victims.